Hello and welcome to JavaScript Language Syntax. So let's look at the objective of this section. So after completing this section, you will be able to understand the language basics like identifiers, variable and constants, primitive data types, keywords and reserved words. Then we'll look at the operators that we have like assignment, logical, string, quotes, boolean arrays and date and time. Then we'll look at some of the statements in JavaScript like if statement, switch statement, while and for loop. Okay, so this is the lectures that we're going to learn in this section. So after this section, you will basically be able to understand how to write JavaScript code. All right, so let's jump into the topic now. Hello and welcome to the lecture on identifiers. Let's look at what are identifiers first. And what is the name that identifiers means? When someone say identifiers in any programming language, they're basically referring to the name that is given to variable, functions, objects, properties and events. Alright, so this is basically a name that you give to variable, function, objects, properties and events. So remember that identifiers are just the naming standards that you are giving to any variable, function, objects or any of the events. Okay, but there are some rules when you define an identifier, because identifier is your name that you give in the programming language. So there are some rules that you can use when defining the identifiers. The identifiers can only contain letters, numbers, underscore and dollar sign. You cannot start an identifier with a number, and identifiers are case sensitive. It is very important to understand this. We're going to do exercise to understand that identifiers are case sensitive. Means you cannot write in any case you want. Identifiers can be in any length, and identifiers cannot use keywords and reserved words. So we'll be covering keywords and reserved words. We'll list out all those things. So you'll understand you cannot use them as an identifier. Some of the valid identifiers looks like this. Start with a character, dollar sign, string and then string. The invalid one cannot start with a number, cannot have false. False basically is again a keyword. Long is a keyword. You cannot have package. Alright. So these are invalid identifiers. So understand why the name identifier is given to it, and where do you use identifiers, and what are the rules that we have when you define identifiers, and part of it what are valid identifiers and what are invalid identifiers. Let's do an example and understand one of the concept of case sensitive, whether to see whether identifiers can be case sensitive or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to head back to PHP training 6. We're going to create a 7th folder and we're going to say JavaScript syntax. We'll create a folder called identifiers, and then we're going to copy the bootstrap file there. Alright, let's open this up in the brackets. So we have to open the folder first. We'll change the folder to JavaScript Language Syntax. Then we have identifiers. We'll open this up. Okay, let's write a simple JavaScript and see whether JavaScript is case sensitive or not. Okay, so I'll say script. Okay, in this I'm going to write my JavaScript, and I'm going to write alert JavaScript is case sensitive. Okay, what I'm doing here is I'm writing alert A caps. So let's see what happens. Okay, there is no alert. If you go to inspect, there is an error, right? We don't know what is alert, right? And if you change it to small a and then refresh, let's understand what is alert, because this is JavaScript is case sensitive. Okay, you have to write in the same case as it is defined. Okay, and if you want to just define inline, right? So let's open this up. It's working fine. So when you click, nothing happens. When you see inspect and you have error, like whenever you click there's an error, right? So reason behind is basically alert. So let's change it back. click refresh, click it, and it works fine, right? So this shows that JavaScript is case sensitive, so be careful when you write JavaScript. It doesn't accept you use the same word in different case, because JavaScript is case sensitive. Alright, so understand what are identifiers and understand what are the valid identifiers and invalid ones, and what are the rules that you have to follow to define the identifiers. Alright, so that's all about identifiers in this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello, welcome to the lecture on variables and constants. So let's define our variables. So let's create one more folder for it. Okay, and let's understand how to define variables and store some value in it. Okay, we have to copy it over from this. So what we're going to do is we're going to just copy the text, open this in the bracket, copy and paste it here. Okay, let's define some variable and then we'll try to print them. Okay, so we understand how to define a variable. So we'll open our script tag, and this is the single line comment, and I'm saying declaring a variable. And how do you declare a variable? You say var and message. Var is a keyword which is used to declare a variable. Then how to initialize the variable with empty string. So message is equal to like this. This is how you basically initialize the variable. And how do you assign the value to a variable? Then you say message say hello to variables. Okay, don't forget the semicolon. You see everywhere I'm ending with a semicolon, right? And also there's no dollar sign like this, there's no sign. Whatever is your message, whatever is your variable name, we're just assigning it the same value to it. Okay, and how do you display? Okay, you can just say alert and just say message, right? So let's view this file. Right, say hello to variables. Fine, it works fine. You have a variable, you initialize it, you assign some value, and then you are displaying it. Okay, and I'll show you how to display them as a log. So if you go to inspect mode and if you go to console, I want to write it here, right? It's very simple. You just say console.log and you say message. So I did nothing, I just say console.log, which will write in the console. So if you just refresh the page and you can see say hello to variable, this is coming up from this line, right? Console.log is writing that variable and it is coming up and showing up in the console. Okay, so this is a way you can even log your messages. Let's try to play around with it. Let's define an integer variable counter and let's alert that. You can say counter before. Okay, how do you add a string to an integer, right? You're saying counter, so you're displaying an integer and you're displaying a string, right? Now you assign that back to the message and you can say counter before plus counter. Okay, you can do that. So I'm showing you different ways to play around with integer, string, and how do you store that in a variable, how to access that variable, and all those things, right? So if you just save this and refresh, okay, there's a counter is 0 and counter is 0 here as well. So now you can say counter is 100. Okay, and the third thing, we're just doing very simple operations here, nothing fancy. just trying to understand how to declare a variable, how to reassign a value, and how to display them. Okay, before and after is 100 and 0 and after is 100, right? You can write after, right? Looks good. Fine. How to define a constant? Very simple. You have a keyword called const, and we can assign the pi value to it. And the rest of it, right? And then how do you want to display them? You can say console.log of pi value. Okay, and then when you print them, okay, you can see that value here. That's nothing but the constant. So constant is defined with a keyword or constant. Variable is defined with a keyword called var. Okay, it's very simple to understand how to define a constant and how to define a variable. Constant is defined with const, variable with var. Then you have learned about how to display the messages in the console.log, and how to define integer, and how to define a string, right? This is just a string. And then how do you attach them into a variable? Let's say you have this message variable. How do you attach an integer and a string together? That is with the plus sign. Okay, so let's play around some more things here. Let's see. Okay, and I want to put a script tag here, right? And I'm gonna say script type JavaScript, okay, inside the body, and I want to write and access this message. Okay, is it possible that when you define a variable somewhere in the page, in the script tag, somewhere in the top, can you access them in the page? That's what I'm trying to show you here. So how do you write something onto the web page? You use document.write. Let's say your message, and you assign the variable. Alright, so document.write is basically you're trying to write some content onto the HTML page. Okay, so here is your message. You have your string and you have attached a variable to it, and this variable is coming up from the script section, right? And then you have used a plus as an operator to combine two strings together, string and a variable together. Okay, and this is the output you'll see on the web page. So let's open that file. Right, you can see your message, and then you can see this message is coming up from the message variable, right? This is a variable that you have defined it on top, and based on the operations and the text that you have assigned is displayed onto the web page. So you can see you can define a variable, you can assign anywhere in the page. Make sure you are writing some script tag. You can only access them inside the script tag. You cannot do this from outside because it doesn't understand what is this. This is a variable defined in JavaScript, so it has to be inside the script. Okay, so remember that and don't get confused of how to access a JavaScript variable in the HTML page. Okay, it should always be inside the script. It doesn't work outside the script. Alright, so that's all about variable and constants, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on primitive data types. So there are three primitive data types. So let me show you that. Okay, so there are three primitive data types: number, string, and boolean. Okay, number is used to store whole number, positive, negative, and decimal numbers. String is used to store characters, and boolean is to store true and false values. Okay, number is represented with numbers, and string is with double quotes and single quotes, and then boolean is basically with true or false. Okay, so let's write a program to understand this. So we have let's open that file. Here is your boilerplate. assign it here. Okay, so let's define those three primitive data types: number, string, and boolean. Okay, we're gonna write some operations here and we'll try to understand that. So the first is we'll understand numeric data type, which is where counter is equal to 0 and counter is equal to counter plus 100. So I'm doing an add operation here using the plus symbol, right? And I'm going to write in the console log. Okay, we have learned this, how to write console log. It will be visible when you go to inspect of your web page, go to console, you can find this text. So I'm say counter. And how do you combine a string and a variable? You just use plus sign and the variable name. Okay, let's do a decimal now. Decimal count is equal to 1.45, and then we'll simply say decimal count is equal to decimal count plus 74.32. okay, then we can say decimal counter here, right? So this is decimals. Then we'll do strings. So strings could be in single quote or double quotes. Okay, to strings you can attach some value, and you can single quote or double quote. I'm not adding a dot in the last. Then you can print this in the console log. Okay, then you have boolean variables, and you can say var flag is equal to true. Okay, then we'll say console.log flag value flag. All right, so now we have defined numeric, decimals, string, and boolean, right? And flag is basically assigned with true, or you can assign with false as well. Okay, and if you notice, this is all written in the console.log. So we'll verify the console.log to see the output. So we open up the primitive. There's no output here. Output will be in the console log. So right click and say inspect. Go to console. So you can see counter there. So let's open our code. That's the counter integer. Then you have decimals. Then you have string, and you have this dot in the last. And then you have your boolean variable. Alright, so those are the primitive data types that we have seen: numeric, decimal, string, and boolean. And also there are some operations that you can do with these primitive data types as well. Alright, so that's all in this lecture on primitive data types, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on assignments. So let's look at the assignment operator. So previously 2 sections was on keyword and reserve words. So I'm gonna say 3, 4, 5, and this is gonna be the 6th one. All right, so let's do an assignment operator here. You take the boilerplate code, put it here, right? So we'll define one variable here. We say var counter is equal to 10. Okay, this itself is an assignment operator. Okay, you are assigning some value to a variable. So in the body section, we say assignment expressions, and we'll define a link here, and on click of that event, okay, we're gonna increment the counter. So we're gonna say counter is equal to counter plus 1 semicolon, and then we will write that counter. Okay, we just say counter here. All right, and with the semicolon, close it. I'm gonna say increment counter. All right, so this code is incrementing counter by 1 and printing it. So we have to watch out the console.log, and you can see the assignment operator is in operation now. Okay, there's another assignment operator is this, which will increment by 1. We can use that. Plus is equal to, and we'll say plus is equal to increment by 1. Okay, so it's counter is equal to counter plus 1. All right, and you can even do by 1, by 2, right? And how do you do by 2? You can use 2 here. All right, so let's run this assignment. Okay, we'll add a break here. Right, let's open our console. We increment by 1. The variable is incrementing because we started with 10, it's 11, 12 and 15 and 16. Now it increments by 2, right? By 1, by 2, by 1, by 2. And you see the web page is able to understand what is a counter variable. Okay, and it's actually saved that variable somewhere in the memory, and when you click that again, it know it is saved at 41. It has to reuse from 42. It's not going back at 10 and redoing it. When it will go back to 10, when you will refresh the page, it will go back to 10. And when you click again, like all the operations again that you're doing will start from 10 again, right? Like 10, 11, 12, 19, and when you refresh, it go back to 10. So that's 12, right? So it's remember the state when the page is not been refreshed, but when you refresh, it basically clean off its existing memory, and then you start creating the new variables and start from there. Okay, so you have to understand this concept, very, very important. When the variables will get refreshed on the JavaScript, whenever there's a refresh happens, all the memory arrays, all the primitive data types, anything that you have stored it here on the variable level will be wiped out, and then when the refresh happens, everything gets loaded from the starting initial value. All right, so this is the examples that you help you understand how to use assignment operator, right? Assignment is equal to and then plus is equal to, but we have understood also about how the variable will behave in the web page as well. All right, so that's all about assignment expression, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on comparison expressions. So let's create a folder for it. Let's create a file. All right, so let's open that up. Use our boilerplate code. Okay, I'm going to remove this internal from here as well. All right, so let's understand what is comparison expression. So we haven't done if conditions and switch conditions. Those will be statements, but there's an operator I want to show you for comparison. Okay, and the operator is called as condition operator, which is nothing but also called as ternary operator. So we'll say counter is equal to 10. And I'm going to say result value. So this is a ternary operator, and we're going to assign the counter if it is counter is less than equal to 10. Okay, then we'll assign 10 or 0. Okay, this is also called as conditional ternary operator. Right, so let's do some more here. Comparison. I'm going to print those counters down here in the page. And say counter, right, and also I'm saying the result value. There's nothing up but this one. Okay, so let's understand this. So we have written a variable and we are doing a ternary operator to say less than 10. This is basically true condition and false. If this condition is true, this value is assigned to this value. If the condition is false, then this value is assigned to this. Okay, because it is equal to, it's true, it's less than, and equal, it's equal to 10, so 10 will be assigned to the result value. If the value is really greater than 10, then the 10 is assigned, or else 0 is assigned. Okay, so we change the value to greater than. Let's see what happens. And here, down here in the body, we're just writing the variables. We're writing the counter variable and result variable. Alright, so compare this 10 and result value is 0. Alright, simple to understand. Understand this operation called as ternary operator, using which you can compare things. Alright, so that's all about comparison operator, and I'll see you in the next one. Well, and welcome to the lecture on arithmetic expression. So in this arithmetic expression, this plus symbol is called as arithmetic operator. Okay, and arithmetic expression always evaluate into a single value. So all this operation on the right hand side will be assigned to the on the left hand side. Alright, so plus, in this example, plus is the arithmetic operator which adds to value. There are other arithmetic operation like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulus, increment, decrement, and the order of precedence means which operator will evaluate first. So from left to right, this operators has the higher priority: plus, plus, minus, multiply, divide, and modulus, and then plus and minus. Okay, so if you have to increment a variable, then you use this arithmetical operator. Okay, which actually means counter is equal to counter plus 1. We have seen this operator, right? We have seen plus, and also we have seen other operators. Let's do an example to understand this much better. Okay, so let's go to arithmetic operator. We can copy the bootstrap file. All right. Let's save these files. Let's write the script tag here. So let's try to understand the arithmetical operator. Let's define a variable counter and write it in the console. What is the initial value of that counter? Right, then we'll use some arithmetical operator of plus. Right, we have incremented it, and down below we'll try to access them. And we have seen this example previously, so I'm going to use the same example here just to show how the arithmetical operator and which are the arithmetical operators here. Okay, so we have counter plus plus, that's one of the arithmetical operator, and then we will log it the counter value. and then we will say increment counter, then we'll say minus minus to decrement the counter. Alright, very simple example. You have some arithmetical operators used in this program, just to make sure you understand how to use arithmetical operator. So we can look at the console now, right? So we are incrementing, we are decrementing, and you see it's back to 10 again, and again you increment, then you decrement. Okay, so you're playing around with the variables here, right? We have defined a variable, and then we are trying to control that variable, increment and decrement it using the arithmetical operators. And as we have seen, there are other arithmetical operators. You can even write a calculator operations, like you're doing addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, very simple operations, right? And then you can use this operator to do those operations. Okay, so that's all about arithmetical expressions and operators, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome. Let's look at the logical expression. So if you go to next section, let's review the logical expression. So in this expression, the ampersand is called as logical operator, which is also called as AND operator. The logical operator is to check the condition, right? If the condition is true or false based on many conditions. So if it is left and right, then you have put the logical operator here. You are basically checking if this is true and this is true. True and true is true. True and false is false. And false is false. Because AND means both sides, it has to be true. Similarly, apart from AND, you also have OR and NOT. OR is basically true false is true, and false true is true. False is false, and true is true. So you can use this operator to decide some logical operation. Okay, and order of precedence is not AND or OR. Okay, let's do an example to understand how to work with logical operators. So I'll create a folder. Let's copy that file. Let's open our brackets and open that file. Okay, so we will write the script tag. And inside the script tag, we'll define some inputs. Okay, this time we will prompt something for user to input it. And how do you write prompt when window into the web page? You have something called as prompt, right? And this is basically accepts a value, and whatever value is entered will be stored in this variable. Okay, I'm going to show you the demo so you'll understand how to work with this. Okay, we are accepting two values from the user, right? The user has to enter first value and the second value. Okay, and then we'll try to do some operations here. Okay, the result is, we're going to say if input 1 is less than input 2, or the input 1 is equal to input 2, then we'll assign that result. Okay, so this is the logical operator here making some decisions. Then we'll try to print that in the output. Okay, and how do you print it? You can use document dot write. Okay, we'll say input 1 less than equal to, that's what we are doing, less than and equal to input 2 is, and then we can say what is the result. Right, so here is a logical operator which is trying to decide whether this is true and whether it's false. Okay, this true and true conditions we are checking with the logical operator, and we'll accept two values from the user. All right, so it's just finding out which one is bigger, 12, 14. Then you say 12 is less than 14 is true, right? Let's do 14 and 12. Okay, 14 is less than or equal to 12, it is false. We're just trying to compare things. So 10 and 20, so 10 is less than 20, true, right? You reverse 20, 10, 20 is less than 20, which is false. All right, nothing fancy here. We're just using prompt default method to get that prompt, right? Get this prompt box, and whatever you enter here will be is coming up from this text, and whatever you enter it here will go and sit in this variable. Okay, and using this variable, I'm using logical operator here to compare between these two variables. Okay, and I'm just using document.write to print that output. Okay, so that's all about logical operator. Play around with it, do some other operations, and I've shown you, or you can do and here, and then you can play around with logical operators. Okay, so that's all for this lecture. I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on string operations. So let's do a string operation. So before that, we go to our document and we'll understand from here what are the operators. So there are two operators, plus and plus is equal to, and you can use, we have seen this previously, how to combine two strings together, combine string to a variable. We have used this plus operator, that is a string operator. Okay, and then we have some methods as well for to play around with the string. We have index of to find the index, substring to chop the string, and also to lowercase and to uppercase. Okay, you can simply say variable name dot to lowercase and the string will be converted to lowercase. Okay, so let's do an example and just to understand how to work with string operations. Copy paste this, right? Okay, so here again we will take two inputs, so we'll go back here. I'm going to copy paste this code which has accepting the input values from the user, and I'm going to say first value, I'll say first name, and second name. Okay, then I'm going to use the operator to combine string together. So I'm going to say var, that is nothing but defining of the username, so I'm gonna I can add the HTML code in it, and I'm gonna put the welcome string here. Input 1, right? And I can say input 2. Now I can close the strong tag. Okay, you can see how I'm creating a string, right? And these are the operators I'm using. I'm using the plus operator to combine the variables and also strings together. Okay, and then you can nicely show the string, welcome string, in the body tag now. Right, so let's open this up. So I'm going to say John Smith, then you can say welcome John Smith. Okay, whatever you're going to enter here, first name, last name, then you can say welcome first name and last name. Okay, this is basically the string operation, right? You're combining strings together, and that's how you do it with the plus symbol. Okay, you cannot even combine the variables that is of type different data types like number and also decimals. You can even combine two strings together. Okay, so that's all for this lecture on string operation. I'll see you in the next one.